I welcome with privilege our next speaker, Dr. Rajan Ravichandran, who is the Director of Nephrology at Miyot International Hospital. He is also a Professor of Practice at IIT Madras. He is Chairman and Founder of Sapiens Health Foundation and Cystinosis Foundation of India. His special interests are blood group incompatible kidney transplantation, cystinosis, and salt intake in the population. He has several scientific publications in leading international and national journals. He has several awards and recognition from international and national bodies, including FACP from USA and FRCP from UK. He has received Dronacharya Award, Service of Excellence Award by American Nephrologist of Indian Origin, and Lifetime Achievement Award by Tamil Nadu Government. We welcome you, sir, and he is here to present the talk on salt reduction and hypertension, strategies for managing blood pressure through dietary changes.
Is it on? Yeah. Good morning, everybody. At the outset, I should thank Dr. Selva Vinayagam, Dr. Nagarajan, and DPH for giving me this opportunity to be in front of you. Of course, I was a bit disappointed first with the previous speaker that no mention at all about salt in the protocol, and I am a highly biased person. I am called a salt doctor, and of course the chairman clarified. I'll go ahead about the salt. Yes. This the audience requires no introduction about the complications. The number one killer in the world is hypertension and its related complications, cardiac, renal, and strokes. What people don't understand is that you can get heart attacks, strokes, and renal failure in the absence of high blood pressure. So your blood vessels can be damaged even if the blood pressure is not high. So it's a very important point to know, because I will elaborate a little later. Salt can damage your blood vessels even if the blood pressure is normal. So what puts up the blood pressure? Anywhere I talk, the first thing they tell me is stress. Sir, I'm highly stressed. I have to travel. There is enormous traffic. There is a work pressure. That's why my blood pressure is high. Even medical people do tell you the same answer. But what happens is, during stress, there are several studies that have shown that the blood pressure goes up only transiently, but does not remain sustained. So what puts up the blood pressure most important?
கொஞ்சம் சைலண்ட் மெயின்டைன் பண்ணுங்க ப்ளீஸ். பின்னாடி சத்தம் அதிகமா இருக்குங்க. ப்ளீஸ் மெயின்டைன் சைலன்ஸ்.
So what puts up blood pressure? The most important is the salt intake. If you take salt, the blood volume expands. When the blood volume expands, the blood vessel tries to dilate to keep the blood pressure normal. This is done by producing nitrous oxide. But in some people, this nitrous oxide is not produced. So that's why we have salt resistant and salt sensitive blood pressure. So in salt sensitive people, the nitrous oxide is not produced and the blood vessel does not dilate and the blood pressure goes up. So the effect of salt in the body is to increase the blood volume. So the most important is salt sensitive and salt resistant blood pressure. This is a genetic factor. So you find that some people are salt sensitive, some are not. But what people don't understand is that over a period of time it can change. It can change with disease. It can change with medications. So it's very important to realize that we have to keep the salt under control. Potassium intake has the opposite action. Potassium has the opposite action of sodium. So it produces lower pressure. That's why low salt substitutes, majority of them contain potassium chloride. Up to 30% of the sodium is replaced by potassium chloride. I'm not going to elaborate on it, but potassium has the opposite action of sodium. Of course, people know weight, lack of exercise, and alcohol are important points producing blood pressure. This is the man from the South American tribal. This man is never exposed to salt in his life for generations. What's his blood pressure? It is 90/60. That's his blood pressure. He has all the stress. He has tribal wars. He has the threat of animals eating him, everything. But in spite of it, his blood pressure is only 90/60 because he's never been exposed to salt in his life. We have been exposed to salt over generations, and that's why 140/90 has become a normalcy from what could have been 90/60. This is the gorilla in the New York Zoo. The gorilla's blood pressure again is 90/60. He kept in the New York Zoo for several months, fed with the normal human diet, blood pressure goes to 140/90. So there is tremendous evidence to show that salt is associated with high blood pressure. More than 50 studies, intervention studies where you have reduced salt and the blood pressure has dropped. Animal studies, genetic mechanisms related to salt sensitivity, treatment meta-analysis, mortality studies, etc. So many are there. The most important are from the UK and Japan and Finland. They are the world leaders. I'll elaborate a little later. So Dr. McGregor from the UK, he is my mentor. He runs the WASH, World Action on Salt and Health, from 2005, and I run the foundation in India from 2009 on salt reduction. So he published showing that if you reduce the salt intake to 5 to 6 grams, strokes and coronary heart disease is reduced considerably. See, this is a time when UK was having a huge problem. The problem is not just prolonging life. Somebody gets a stroke. Who will take care of person with strokes? The government has to send people, nurses, they live for long after the stroke also. So it's a huge burden on the state. Japan, same thing. Japan used to have an enormous salt intake long back. They used to take 13 grams of salt, and it was reduced by a government legislation. And they found that in spite of smoking, the incidence of strokes and heart attacks fell down by reducing salt intake. What does WHO recommend? I am sure all of you are aware. It recommends just 5 grams of salt from all sources. This is very important to know. It's from the natural sodium that is present in the food that you eat. It is the added salt during cooking and the salt that is present, the hidden salt in preserved food or packed food. It's very important because when I tell my patient you have to take 5 grams of salt, he thinks in addition to whatever he is taking, he should take another spoon of salt. So very important to highlight that it should be from all sources. And this confusion between sodium and salt. A lot of people do not know that 1 gram of sodium is equivalent to 2.5 grams of salt. Common salt is sodium chloride. So there is a chloride part of it. Salt was discovered 8,000 years back as a preservative. So it was not discovered for taste. In those days, the fish would stay in brine if you put only salt. Otherwise, during winter months or cold months, you can't go for hunting. So the only way food could be preserved is by using salt. Even now, the best preservative in the world is salt. You would have seen that if you add salt and prepare your sambar, it doesn't get spoiled in the night. Whereas you prepare a sambar without salt, by evening, it will get spoiled. You know the famous Padamari, Uppilla Pandam Kuppaile. So the meaning is that people think Uppillena, it's not tasty. It's not that. If you don't add salt, it will rot. The bacteria will grow. Even Colgate sells the toothpaste with salt. It knows that the bacteria can be killed in the gums. So salt is a poison, slow poison actually. So 10 to 15 grams. What is the salt intake in India? Did I go into it? Yeah. What is the salt intake in India? There are very few studies for such a large population. Studies have varied between 9 to 11 grams, and some of them, the previous studies, between 10 to 15 grams of salt per day. This is about 2 to 3 times what the WHO recommends. Cultural practices are very different, and people eat lot of preserved food in terms of snacks, pickles, papads, etc. So what is the best way to identify the salt intake? It is the 24 hours urinary sodium. In a steady state, whatever salt you eat is removed by the kidneys. Source of salt I already covered. There are some myths saying that salt is a must for tasty food. Actually, salt is a dominant taste. If you stop salt for 2 weeks, you will start appreciating other tastes. Uppu, tuvarpu, kasappu, ella you can appreciate only if you reduce the salt and sugar. They are dominant tastes. The French chef gets angry if you ask for a salt. He says, my flavors are all killed if you add salt. So salt kills flavors. Children require more salt. Again, this is again wrong. Growing children require less salt. In UK, the children are given school food without salt. Of course, more salt is required in hot weather like tropical country, which is again a myth. You know, sweat contains very low sodium. It contains less than 5 milliequivalents per liter. Sweat is basically water once you get acclimatized. So if you taste your skin and you know there is salt in that, that means you are taking too much salt. It's a very simple test. So you don't require more salt in hot weather. What you require is more water. Other damaging effects of salt, I am not going into it. Who is responsible for reducing salt? The public, the government, the food industry. Of course, public should be aware. So that is where we are doing. We are trying to create an awareness by various posters, documentaries, videos, celebrities talking about salt, etc. We have to create a public awareness. The government is responsible for, of course, the food labeling. It is responsible for certain legislations on salt. The food industry, most important is the food industry. Food industry should gradually reduce the salt content. We wrote to several food manufacturers and the Nestle responded well and they have reduced the salt in noodles by 10%. So it's one of the important source of high salt intake is the noodles in India. The WHO in 2023 warned after the COVID epidemic, the biggest killer is going to be salt related and people, all the government should take care of salt intake of the population. So reformulating the food, it should be done gradually. So you should reduce the salt content in the ready-made food as well as while cooking. Both has to be done. Government has to have public policies, labeling of the food stuff. That is very, very important, packed food. I'll just show you. See, how do you know? I'll go to the next slide. How do you know which is see, the normal man doesn't know how much salt to take. He can't look at a label which is so in fine print and read out what is the sodium content. Sometimes it is written as sodium, sometimes it is written as salt. How does he make out? So I think we should follow the signal labeling of UK, where red means the salt content is high. Not salt, it is, they are using it for all three, trans fat, salt and sugar. Red color means it is dangerous. Yellow means it is okay. Green means it is permissible. I think we should in India also introduce this signal labeling which will help us to know, the public should know. When you go to the shop, you should be able to see a packed food, a noodle for example, a pasta or whatever snack you are taking. What is the safe level to take it or not? So the public health campaign is a chronic, we have to educate the public that it is a chronic poison. It is a major cause of death. Schools, communities, yeah. No, I am back. In industries, see a very important effect was in the UK. UK, the commonest source of salt is the bread. The Englishman eats bread for breakfast, lunch and dinner, all three. And their main intake of salt was through the bread. So what the government did was reduce the salt in the bread by 5% every year. So in about 10 years, they were able to reduce almost half the salt content of bread and people were not aware of it. They still think the bread tastes the same. So if you do it slowly over a period of time, people may not be aware. Of course, other measures like tax on salt can be done. See, this is a label in India. I took it up from one of those things. There is salt, the sodium labeling is still not mandatory in our country. So you find that protein is mentioned, calories are mentioned, trans fat is mentioned, sugar is mentioned, but not necessarily salt. So salt should be made mandatory, and I am sure the efforts are going on. So you go abroad, you go anywhere, you will find the option that is given to you. Like in milk, 3%, 2%, 1%. So you have a low salted, you have unsalted items available, Lays, which is available all over the world. In US, they give you the option of low salt or no salt. Same way, famous brands, all of them give it. This is a product which we have been using it in Chennai, which is our Indian salt. We provided either low salt or no salt from our foundation. I'm skipping some of the slides for the lack of time. Normally, I give a talk for about an hour at least about salt. So worldwide action. Several countries are taking an action on realizing the importance of reducing salt. So you have to first put a target, then have a program to implement it over a period of time. 64 countries have legislations. Some of them are voluntary, some of them are regulated. If you see in New York, the mayor introduced that all menu cards should contain a red mark if it contains high salt. This was introduced 5 years back. Singapore has a program. Again, we have the salt, avoid the salt shaker. We have been campaigning to the restaurants in Chennai, telling them not to keep the salt shaker on the table. Because the tendency is, even without tasting, people just use the salt and add salt while talking to each other and then eat that. So not realizing that the chef has already added salt in the soup. So we should not keep salt shaker on the table. If somebody asks for his poison, it is left to him. But don't serve it on the table. So Singapore has a program where salt shakers are not kept on the table. Of course, Thailand has a huge program on salt reduction. They are very effective. They have several guidelines on it, what they have been doing, and this has got published recently in the Lancet. As I said, we wrote to several companies. I run a foundation since 25 years, and we wrote to almost 300 food manufacturers. Hindustan Lever and Nestle alone responded, and they said that they are already on to it with salt reducing programs. We have several awareness posters. If you have a chance, please log into our website, sapiensfoundation.org. We are called Sapiens Foundation. That's because we are Homo sapiens. We are supposed to be wise, different from animals. So Sapiens Health Foundation, sapiensfoundation.org, if you can log into it, or you can log into lowsalter.org. We have a new website, very easy, lowsalter.org. I would request you to log into it. Not only that, become a member in the low salter group so that we will interact with you on all the salt programs. So we have a lot of posters with famous celebrities and whatever I mentioned. Videos, so you can see a lot of videos are there. Even the former vice president, when he was the vice president, he gave a talk on salt reduction, and of course several humorous talks we have. I think this is not working. This is again the superstar talking on salt. I don't know why it's not working. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. That was very comprehensive about the salt, which is culturally very valuable. They keep in the house as when you come like that in the shop everywhere. Yes. You should only keep it like that and not use it. That's what they said. An important thing is invisible, just like invisible fats, you highlighted how invisible salt gets into a thing. Yes. 4 times or 3 times what is a daily requirement. Yes. And how to reduce that is definitely challenging. Apart from labeling, we need to have persuasive messages. That is well taken, advocacy. Excellent, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So instead of salt, pepper can be replaced. Pepper.
Of course. If you see one of the slides, there are 5 ways to reduce the salt intake to 5 grams. That is, you add other spices, other herbs to mask. If you can appreciate the flavor of the food by adding other this thing. For example, it's not just pepper alone. You can add all the spices. So which different spices can be used for different food stuff. so that less of salt can be used. Yes, herbs can be used. Sure, all this can be used.
Thank you, sir. Now we request JD MCH sir to felicitate the speaker.